React Router just had a major update to version 6. Let's take a look. Hello and welcome. Hi, I'm Dave. React Router just had a major update to version 6. And the React Router site has some great documentation. So let's take a look. Up here at the top it says documentation. I'll click there and you can see 4 sections. Now if you're new to React Router, this section's for you right here. But I went to the familiar with React Router and it gave some great examples that helped me refactor my project, and that's what we're going to do today, is refactor chapter 16 that introduced React Router in my React.js for Beginners course, and we'll refactor it from version 5.2, which was what was released at the time, to the new version 6. There's also a wanna dive deep section here in the documents that looks like you could go even further than we're going to go today, and frequently asked questions section as well. And there's still previous versions documentation available down here. So really good stuff on the React Router site. Let's bring up Visual Studio Code. I've got it right down here at the bottom. There we go. And I've got the package.json file open. Now, this starter code is going to be linked to in the description. And again, it is the code from chapter 16 in my React.js for Beginners course, where we're building a blog. And React Router allows your React application to have multiple pages, like a normal website with different URLs that you can navigate to. A quick look at our React.js blog from my React.js for Beginners course. And you can see it's got a few posts here. We can go to an About page, and this is all enabled by React Router, allowing us to change the different pages. We can go to a post page for a new post and create a post here if we want. And we can come back to the blog with all the different posts. We can click any one of those posts to see the detail on that specific post as well. And we can filter the post by typing anything that's in the title or the body of the post. And so that is the basic application that we're going to refactor. And so what we need to do in the package.json is look at the React Router. Here it is. And we've got version 5.2. So we need to go ahead and upgrade to version 0.6. Now let me show you what happens if you just try to update. I'm going to type npm update and then type react router-dom. And let's look at what happens. This is not what you want, but I just want to show an example of what will happen if you just update the React Router DOM with npm. Okay, and with the update finished, you can see now we just have version 5.3. And that is because this is a new major release going to version 6. So we actually need to install it again. In software and npm releases, the first number over here on the right is a patch, and the second number is a minor release. But over on the left, that's a major release, and that introduces breaking changes. So you have to be serious and actually want to install it, not just update. So you're not going to update to something that breaks your application, but now when we install version 6, it will break our application until we refactor. So I'm going to type npm I, and then we want react router-dom and then the @ symbol, and we'll put 6, and let's go ahead and press enter, and we'll install React Router version 6, and then we'll be able to refactor our code. Okay, and with that complete, you can see we now have React Router version 6, and there's actually been 2 minor patches since 6.0.0. We've got 6.0.2. Okay, moving on, let's go over to our Index.js and start refactoring our code. Many of the examples you will see for React Router give all of the examples on one page, but here, this being an actual application and how I did it in the React.js for Beginners course video is create part of the router on the Index.js, and then I did the rest in the App.js, and that's completely fine if you want to do that too, and that's what we'll do today. So we've got browser router. Oftentimes you just see that used. I used an alias, so I imported browser router as router, and that's what we have here, and that's still how you want to start out, so that's fine. But we also need to import routes now instead of just route. And then we still need to import route here as well. And that's because every route needs to be inside a routes. So even though you start out with router, and that's what we would typically do here, we need to go ahead and add routes. And we'll find later as we work in the app component that routes really replaces what we were using called switch. But now we have to have it here as well because we have a route inside. And now the route itself has changed somewhat because we are going to use another routes inside of our app. So it will be nested. We don't just want the slash here. We want to put a slash and an asterisk. And that way it will match anything that goes beyond the length of this initial route. So we have a slash asterisk, and that lets us know we're going to put more routes nested inside of this route. After that, we no longer have this component attribute. The component is changed to element. And then we no longer just name the component. Now we actually put the component as you would see it inside the JSX. So there is our app component inside of the element. And that's all the changes that we need to make to our Index.js. So let's save that much. Now let's move on to the app component itself. So we'll click on App.js in the file tree. And we can see we're importing route, switch, and useHistory from React Router DOM. Now switch is changing, so let's go ahead and change that to routes. And then useHistory doesn't exist anymore either, so let's change this to useNavigate. And after we've made those two changes, our imports are complete. Now let's just scroll down to the page where we previously defined history, and let's change that to navigate. So we'll switch the word history, what we're defining with a const there, to navigate, and then we'll change useHistory to useNavigate. I'm going to go ahead and press Control F just so I can find where else history is used in the file, and it says there's 2 occurrences. And now that I've found history, we don't need to use history.push anymore. We have defined navigate instead, and I'm going to press Control D to select both of those in Visual Studio Code. I'm just going to change it to navigate, and that replaces our history.push. Okay, I'll close the find, and we'll go ahead and scroll down to the JSX, and now we'll have some major changes to take place here. The way our current JSX is laid out, we have everything inside of a div with the class name of app. That's our app component. But we need to change this because now React Router really supports and in the documentation shows using a layout component because you no longer have components just like header here right inside the JSX. They are all part of those element attributes like we set in the Index.js. So we need to create a new component first, and I'm going to do that over here in the file tree, and we'll just call it layout.js. Now, as many have told me, they can type _RRv6 and create a new React functional component. I can't seem to do that, and I haven't spent the time to find out why, so I press Ctrl-Alt-R, and then I type _RRv6, and then I can create my functional component like that. And this layout component is essentially going to outline our app component or the components in our app that are always present. And our app is a blog, so we're always going to have that header and footer, and we even have a nav bar. So let's go back and grab those things that we had in the App.js. And you can also see that a div is right there. So our div is already part of that as well. So let's grab the div, and we'll have a header and a nav to start out. So I'm going to go ahead and copy these, and we'll come back and make changes to where they are later. I'll replace this top div with the header and the nav. And then we'll see if we had anything else at that top level here in our app. And I believe we have a footer when we get down to the bottom that is not inside of the switch as well. And yep, there we have a footer. And then of course the closing div. So I'll copy that and put it in the layout component as well. Now, besides that, we need to still import these components to use inside of the layout component. So back in the app component, we need to scroll up and find those import statements for header, nav, and footer. And this time I'm going to go ahead and cut with Control X, remove all 3 of those, and I will import them right here inside of the layout component and save that. Now we can see our nav is receiving a couple of props. It gets search and set search. So we need to go ahead and receive those in the layout component. So that will be search and set search that are passed down to the layout component. And React Router has introduced something new called an outlet, and we need to import that here as well. So we'll import outlet from, here we need quotes. I'll use a single quote, I guess, to match the rest. React Router DOM. And now that we have our outlet, it represents all of the other components that will be nested inside. And so this will be our main and our about and anything else that we have show up in that main area. But the footer, the nav, and the header will all be constant in our blog. Okay, with those changes in place, let's go back to the app and make some of the changes that will now make sense over here because we have that layout component. And I'm not thinking as I scroll down, we still need to import the layout here. So let's go ahead and import that at top. That will be layout from /layout. There we go. Okay, now we can use layout down here in the JSX as well. So I scroll back down. So we removed the div, the header, and the nav. So let's go ahead and remove those. And then underneath, we also removed the footer and the div here. Get rid of that blank line. We'll be replacing the switch with routes. So let's go ahead and select switch, and I'll select the other one with the Control D, and we'll type routes to replace it. Now we have routes surrounding all of the other components, or the component routes here, instead of switch. And now one point of emphasis with React Router version 6 is that it is smarter. It doesn't need that specific hierarchy. It knows which is a more exact path than another, essentially. So we don't need the exact here as part of the path anymore, but we do need to add that element attribute here and specify what element will be presented at that root path. And right now, that will be our layout because that is our top level. And remember, layout receives a couple of props, so we need to pass those down. So we'll have search equals search, and then we'll also have set search equals set search as those are being passed down. And now we'll no longer just be able to put in a component like home here. So this needs to be a route, but we'll remember we're going to use home. So this is a route. And then we'll say this is our index because this is what we want to show up by default inside of this path. So we have our layout, and then remember what we showed for our outlet. So our outlet will be replaced by this index route by default. And here we need to set our element attribute again. And then once we define the element, then we start our home component. And yes, it does receive the posts as well. So after that is closed, we need to end that element attribute here with the curly brace. But then after that, we can go ahead and close the route as well too. So let's get rid of this closing route. And we can nest routes inside of routes. So a route doesn't necessarily have to have its own element. We can be defining a parent, and that's what I'm going to do here. So I have a route. I'm going to set the path equal to post. Now this will match more than one route, and that's okay. Once again, the new React Router version 6 is supposed to be smart enough that we don't need the exact path here to say this is post before and put it before another route like post with the ID. So I'm going to go ahead and remove this one in favor of the one we just created. And notice we didn't need the backslash there either in front of post. But then after that, we can no longer have a new post component just out here without being inside of a route. So let's go ahead and wrap this in a route as well. So this will be inside of this post path. So I'm going to create route, say this is the index for the post path, and then set the element attribute to the new post component. And then we can close that element attribute here, and then we can still close the component with the other slash and the greater than symbol. I'm going to select all of this and tab it in just a little more so we can see this is nested inside of the post path, but it is the index for the post path. So if we went to our blog URL /post, we would get the new post component rendered. From there, I'm going to scroll up so we have a little more room to work. We're not ready to close out a route here yet. What we are going to do is have this route with the path of post ID, and that actually looks correct. But then once again, we won't have post page here by itself. So we need to change a couple of things. Instead of just closing the route there, we'll set the element attribute equal to the post page. And then after post page, I'm going to put these props that we're passing down on different lines. So we have posts and handle delete, and then close it out on a separate line as well in the element attribute, and then close the route. And it looks like I need to tab this in just a little further to match the one above it, and that's fine. And then we want to go ahead and have a closing route for our post route that we started here, and then these two routes are nested inside of it. Now finally, we don't have much to change with the about or the catch-all path here that is the asterisk, but there is a little. First of all, we don't need the slash any longer with about. Second, instead of component, these both need to be element attributes. And then we can't just name the components. We actually have to put the components in as we normally would in JSX. So we have about and we have missing. And then I believe we need to close a route yet. I just had prettier auto format and I don't like what that did. But yes, we haven't closed this route. And of course, that's the index route or the top level route that has our layout. So we need to close it here before the routes. So let's close this route, and maybe prettier will format our code just a little bit differently. There we go. So now this looks correct to me. So what we start out with is our top level route that supports our layout. And remember, our layout component has the header, nav, and footer, and then all of the other content is represented with this outlet component that we import from React Router here. Then in the App.js, after we have the layout, everything else is nested inside. So we don't close the layout route until the very end. But then once we're nested inside of the layout route, this is the index. So the home component is what renders by default in place of that outlet that we have in our layout component. After that, if for some reason we went to /post, then we would render one of the routes inside this path. And the index route for inside the post path is the new post component. But if we went to /post and then provided an ID in the URL, then we would render the post page component to show that post. Other possibilities besides the post route are the about route, or any other route is caught by this catch-all here, and that renders the missing component. And those are the major changes for our blog application. So let's go ahead and save this, and let's look at just a few other components where we were using a piece of React Router. In our missing component, I click on that, you can see we were importing link from React Router. Link didn't really change. There's nothing to change here as far as what we want from the link. We want this to go back to the home page, and that's what we're providing, and that will work out just fine. Now remember, in the Index.js, we had to provide slash with an asterisk. So make sure you get that right, or anything that goes beyond that will not be routed correctly. So slash with an asterisk here because we had another routes inside of that, and that could send everything else off. And that was right here is our second routes. After the missing component, we can look at the nav component. It also imports link. Now, if we wanted to here, I believe we could change something, and that is simply because we no longer need the slash in front of post or about in this component. But that's a very minor change, and even if you left the slash, I think it works just fine. Let's look at our post component that also uses React Router. Once again, it has link here, and we have the link with a slash. If you wanted to remove that slash, I believe you could. And I'm not so sure there's any other link on this page, just to make sure. Well, it says there's 3. We've got link, Link and link at the top. Nope, that's it. And moving on to the post page, we have one other hook from React Router, and that's useParams. This hook, unlike useHistory, did not change. So remember, we changed the useHistory hook to useNavigate. But useParams works the same way, so we're still pulling that parameter ID out of the URL with the useParams hook, and that is just fine. So I'm going to click back to the App.js because that's where we did most of our work. Let's go ahead and pull up the terminal window, type npm start, and see if our blog is working as we expect it to, or if we missed anything. It looks like our blog is working just fine. We've got 4 posts here. We can go to our About page. We can go to our New Post page. We can go home. We can click on any one of the posts and see that post detail. And we should still be able to filter posts as well. Second, third, fourth, and so on. Our blog is working as expected, and we've refactored everything to React Router version 6. So this should give you a good jump start on those changes that are necessary when you're taking a legacy project now with version 5 to the new React Router version 6. Remember to keep striving for progress over perfection, and a little progress every day will go a very long way. Please give this video a like if it's helped you, and thank you for watching and subscribing. You're helping my channel grow. Have a great day, and let's write more code together very soon.